How does a deported, low-level street dealer build a $20 billion empire and bring an entire nation's military literally to its knees? Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the sudden, violent fall of the world's most dangerous cartel leader and the terrifying rise of the empire he left behind, the CJNG. Okay, before we get into the dramatic military raids and the massive international fallout, we really have to start with an impossible paradox. I mean, how exactly does a deported street dealer infiltrate the Mexican police force and then ultimately transform into a cartel kingpin with a $5 million bounty on his head? Seriously, it sounds like a movie script, but as you'll see, it's 100% real. Okay, let's dive into this. To really understand the kingpin known as El Mencho, you have to look at his origins. The guy drops out of 5th grade to guard illegal marijuana fields by the time he's 14. Seeking the American dream, he heads to California in the 80s, but finds crime instead. He gets arrested in San Francisco in 86, caught selling heroin to undercover cops in 92, and by 1997, at age 30, he's paroled and deported right back to Mexico. And right here is where the story takes a massive twist. Upon returning to Mexico, this convicted drug dealer somehow managed to become a Mexican police officer. And no, this wasn't some heartfelt redemption arc, this was the ultimate infiltration. Wearing a badge gave El Mencho a front-row seat to exactly how the system worked from the inside. He learned how the police could be bought, exactly who was corruptible, and where all the loopholes were. That insider knowledge, that would become his absolute most dangerous weapon. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how he used that knowledge. Just imagine a local Mexican mayor earning a salary of, say, 30,000 pesos a month. One night, an SUV pulls up. Cartel men step out with a gun in one hand and a briefcase containing 500,000 pesos in the other. They offer a very simple choice, plata o plomo, silver or lead. Take the money or take a bullet. El Mencho used this exact brutal leverage to just completely buy out entire local governments and build up his syndicate. Act 2. Building a fentanyl empire. So by 2010, El Mencho had formed his own syndicate, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG. And let me be perfectly clear, they weren't just your standard street gang. They evolved into a terrifying paramilitary force. Just look at May 1st, 2015. When the Mexican military launched helicopters to capture El Mencho, CJNG was actually waiting for them. Armed with heavy machine guns and RPGs, the cartel literally shot a military helicopter right out of the sky. 9 military personnel were killed. Federal investigators noted that not since Pablo Escobar had a drug mafia taken on the state in such a direct, militarized way. But firepower alone doesn't build a $20 billion empire, right? You need a product. And for CJNG, that product was synthetic drugs. The reality of this is absolutely terrifying. Fentanyl is 50 times more powerful than heroin. Literally just 2 milligrams, which is roughly the equivalent of a few grains of sand resting on your palm, is enough to be completely fatal. The economics of this synthetic drug are just staggering. Unlike cocaine, which, requires agricultural land and Colombian suppliers, synthetic drugs can be made entirely in hidden labs using chemicals imported from China. Get this, it costs the cartel a mere 10 cents to produce a single fentanyl pill. 10 cents. That same exact pill is then sold on the streets of the United States for anywhere from $10 to $30. Let's scale that up for a second, because the profit margins are exactly what fueled CJNG's war chest. An initial investment of just $500 in production costs can yield a jaw-dropping $20 million in pure profit for the cartel. This basically infinite stream of cash allowed them to corrupt officials, buy military-grade weapons, and even take control of vital infrastructure, like the port of Manzanillo, just to secure their chemical supply chains. America's accidental cartel playbook. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that behind the immense power of the cartels lies a massive paradox. Historical policies from both the US and Mexico actually helped build the very crisis they're fighting today. It's really a perfect storm of unintended consequences, from the CIA supporting Contra rebels and intersecting with cartels in the 80s to the NAFTA trade agreement in 1994. Add in lax border gun laws and highly controversial government sting operations like Fast and Furious, and you can see how each step inadvertently fortified the cartels from the ground up. Take NAFTA, for example. While it was fundamentally a trade agreement, it had massive unintended logistical consequences. Before NAFTA, about 7,500 trucks crossed the border daily. After, it spiked to 12,000.
It became physically impossible for border agents to check every single truck, essentially opening a massive superhighway for drug smuggling. On top of that, the sudden influx of cheap U.S. crops displaced an estimated 2 million Mexican farmers. This created a huge, desperate labor pool that the cartels swooped in and quickly recruited as foot soldiers.
Then there is the serious issue of firepower. Between 2014 and 2018, 70% of the firearms recovered in Mexico originated right in the United States. With roughly 6,700 gun dealers located along the border region, an estimated 200,000 firearms are smuggled into Mexico every single year. These are the very weapons directly arming groups like CJNG.
And perhaps most shockingly, there was Operation Fast and Furious. U.S. agencies intentionally allowed over 2,000 weapons to be smuggled across the border into Mexico. The intention was to track them back to cartel leaders, but instead, they lost track of the weapons entirely. Those exact same guns were later used in crimes against both Mexican citizens and American law enforcement. Act 3, the blowback and the raid. This incredibly complex web of corruption, infinite drug money, and heavy weaponry leads us directly into the explosive climax, where the Mexican state finally corners its biggest ghost. Let's fast forward to the morning of February 22, 2026. Following an intelligence lead regarding El Mencho's romantic partner, Mexican Special Forces, the National Guard, and the Army quietly surrounded a secluded cabin complex in the tourist town of Tapalpa. A fierce dawn shootout erupted. El Mencho actually tried to flee into the woods with his bodyguards, but was captured, severely wounded. He was airlifted toward Mexico City, but ultimately died en route. The elusive kingpin was finally dead. But as we're about to see, taking out the boss absolutely did not stop the machine. The cartel's retaliation was instant, and it was complete madness. A senior CJNG leader, basically acting as El Mencho's right hand, ordered coordinated attacks across the entire country. They even went as far as offering a bounty of 2,000 pesos, which is only about $100, to anyone who killed a member of the military. Think about that. The cartel was now acting entirely like a narco-terrorist organization, openly funding hits on the state's own army.
The sheer scale of the chaos was completely unprecedented. Gunmen set fires across 20 different Mexican states. They set up over 250 burning roadblocks, just destroying businesses and vehicles. Schools closed, flights were canceled, and Guadalajara, Mexico's second-largest city, was literally turned into a ghost town. Security analysts were comparing this total war against the state to the darkest days of Pablo Escobar in Colombia.
Meanwhile, the international response has been equally dramatic and highly controversial. In late 2025, anticipating these kinds of cartel escalations, the U.S. military launched Operation Southern Spear. In a totally unprecedented move, the U.S. began dropping bombs on alleged drug trafficking vessels in international waters, resulting in over 150 deaths. Now, human rights groups have strongly condemned this, pointing out that these strikes are happening without trials and innocent fishermen have tragically been caught in the crossfire. This entire situation has created an international political powder keg. In January 2026, the U.S. president stated bluntly on television, the cartels are running Mexico, and even threatened land incursions. You can imagine, this has placed immense pressure on Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. The raid on El Mencho was meant to prove, once and for all, that Mexico could handle this war on its own terms, without American boots on the ground. So the crucial point is this. Taking down one man, even a major kingpin like El Mencho, doesn't break the machine. It is an unbroken supply chain. As long as there is massive drug demand in the U.S., the cartels have a market. As long as chemicals keep flowing from China, they have their product. As long as cartel corruption pays more than a local police salary, the operations will continue. And as long as U.S. guns flow south, the cartels remain fully fledged armies. It's a perfect, deadly loop. And this unbroken loop brings us to a looming, highly volatile reality. In June 2026, the FIFA World Cup, literally the largest sporting event on the planet, will host matches right in Guadalajara, the very same city that CJNG recently turned into a burning ghost town. The eyes of the entire world are going to be focused directly on cartel territory. Which really leaves us with this final pressing question. We've seen how the cartel exploited poverty and systemic flaws, sure, but we've also seen how massive international demand, weapons, and trade policies laid the absolute foundation for their power. This isn't just one country's problem. It's a deeply shared crisis. So if all sides keep fueling the root causes, can the cycle of violence ever truly be broken? Think about that for a minute. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.